Hey everyone, Chris Lopez here, and welcome to another deal analysis episode. Today, we'll be talking about an 8 unit apartment building here in Denver with a long term value add play. And I got my co host today and business partner, Preston Newberry. Preston, how's it going?
It's going great, Chris. Thanks for having me on. I'm really looking forward to digging into this one. This was one of the fun ones we did last year, and so much data and great location. And I think as you'll see as we go through the slides, there's a lot of really good upside here in this one. So it's going to be a really good long term property for our clients.
Yeah, this was a great one. All right, so getting the details here. As we said earlier, it's an 8 unit apartment building not too far from Denver University. Now, six out of the 8 units had been updated in the last few years. Two of the units had not been, but it is great construction, all brick, so it should be very longer term, low maintenance. And where we saw the value upside is that because 2 units could be turned and updated and increase market rents. Some of the current leases were below market rents. There was also 7 storage units and 8 parking spaces. Neither of those were being charged either as additional rent or in addition to the rent on those. And plus, it was just being mismanaged. So, lots of things here for if someone spends the next year just taking care of some of these issues, getting better management in place, updating these units, updating the rents, the leases as they turn. A really great way to increase cash flow and also increase the value of the property. Since this is a commercial property, 5 units or more, it's mostly valued on the income approach. So the more income the property brings in, the better value or the higher the value it is. And these were some repeat clients we worked with on this property. And one of their main goals was not having the best cash flow right now, but is actually buying in some really high quality locations around Denver. Like, hey, great, the property will cash flow now, but they just want a great place to park their money. If they could find one of these value add plays, they wanted it as well. And this met the criteria. So we were really happy to get this deal in contract. And this property came off of, oh, I don't know, was it MLS or LoopNet Preston? It was one of those, right?
It was on both. We found it on
Okay.
both, but yeah, it did come off the MLS.
Now, what do you say to people when they go out there and say, oh, well, anything on LoopNet is trash? Because I've heard that like 3,000 times. What do you say when
We hear
people,
that we hear that a lot, and the majority of stuff you kind of see on LoopNet is usually not updated, or they don't keep a lot of the records in there. But there still are deals to be found on LoopNet. So whenever we're looking for commercial stuff, that's always one of the places that we'll look and scour and see if there's anything worthwhile to check out on LoopNet.
yeah, and I mean, that's the great thing to keep in mind out there is there's no one best source other than, hey, you go out there, you look here, you look there, you talk to this person, you look there, and that usually leads to finding a deal that meets our criteria. So getting a few more details here. Um, so it's an 8 unit, and they're all studio apartments. And we said it's in the University Park neighborhood, not too far from DU. Now it was listed at $1.32 million, and then we ended up getting it for about $1.262 million. So I don't know, 40 or $50,000 below list price. And again, the reasons we liked it, we already talked about, location, location, location. This is just a great location in Denver. And based on the location and the quality of the construction on here, it's definitely could be a legacy asset. And a legacy asset is one that, hey, you just buy, hold on to for retirement, maybe pass it down to your kids just because it's such a great property. And of course, there's value add upside there. So just overall a wonderful property. And one of the things too, and this is such a big difference on, I mean, all transactions, but especially on, the bigger stuff, is the type of agents and sellers you work with. Now, of course, you get across the board here, but Preston, talk about the professionalism of the seller and the agent on the other side of this transaction.
Yeah, this was something that was really, really good about this transaction, and something I enjoyed is that both the listing agent and the seller were experienced in what they were doing. They knew the multifamily space really well, and they were just very cooperative and easy to work with. And it made negotiations and just all the things we go through in a transaction like this a lot easier to deal with. And that's always worth time is worth money. And so when we're able to work with people that are easy to work with, it definitely helps everyone through the process.
So why don't you walk us through the details of the contract?
Absolutely. So, as Chris said, we found this property on the MLS, and we kind of started searching around for some stuff for our clients. Reached out to our network, and we did come across this one in the MLS. So, It'd been on the market for over 200 days. And I think one of the big reasons it'd been on the market is, it was just overpriced. So, got a hold of the listing agent, went and walked the property, and we all kind of, sat down and crunched the numbers and found a price that would work for everybody and got it under contract. So that was the other nice thing about working with these guys is, it all just comes down to the numbers and what the property does, how it performs. And as Chris said, that's how you value the commercial property. So once we got under contract, obviously went to the inspection time. And the other nice thing is this property was, kind of a 1950s brick, really, really solid property. And, most units have been updated. So that took care of a lot of issues that we could have come across. There were some minor electrical and plumbing things, nothing crazy. Roof needed a little spot repair. One of the windows was broken, and a small sewer issue. So all in all, for a big property like this, there really weren't any major issues. So again, working with a really cooperative seller, they were super good to us as far as how we were negotiate the inspection items. They took care of the plumbing and electrical stuff, made a few roof repairs and got a certification for us, even went in and replaced the window. And on top of that, gave us a credit for the sewer repair. So our clients could go in and take care of that at a later date after closing.
And something to note about the seller here is this seller, he owns hundreds and hundreds of units, just not in this part of Denver. And so part of the reason he was selling his property was not because it was a bad property, not because it was in bad shape, but because it was too small for him and outside of his geographic location. And so it's just one of those things that just didn't fit his portfolio. And that's why it kind of been mismanaged, wasn't getting a lot of attention, and he was just looking to sell it. So it was a really good property and just one of those interesting things where you always want, people often ask us, hey, why is the seller selling this? Sometimes we know, sometimes we don't. And usually has no impact on why we're buying the property. But it's, a lot of times we go, oh, well, it's a distressed seller. Oh man, they're only selling it if it's a bad property. No, not necessarily. This guy has hundreds and hundreds of units. It was just that this property was outside of what his normal, what he wanted to keep in his portfolio, and therefore he was just getting rid of that one and getting more properties that fit his current mold. So talking about some financing here, we went with one of our favorite local credit unions. They've got great rates and just some great terms. So since this is a value add play, which will probably take 12 to 18 months to really get it up and running and having some operating data to go out there and get a refinance in there, they chose to go with a shorter loan. So they did a 3-1 ARM. So the interest rate's fixed for 3 years, but it's amortized over 3 years. So the plan is within that 3 years, they can get everything up and running, bring it up to market rent, have enough operating data for 6 months, so they can go out there and then get a non-recourse loan in place to get a longer-term financing in place, and possibly also take out some cash as well. The appraisal, when it happened, it came in at above the price we got for, which was great. And as Preston mentioned, we got about $5,000 in seller concessions for the sewer. And since this was commercial loan, no PMI and no interest rate buy down. So what we're going to walk you through now is a couple of screenshots of some spreadsheets. And so we're actually going to do the actual numbers as for when we bought it. And then we'll go through two scenarios for some different pro forma numbers. And the pro forma number is what we expect to get in rent and to update some things. So we'll talk through these. If you have a hard time following, click on the link in the show notes and go to the deal analyses parts of the website and find the blog. All those will be typed out. All the screenshots will be there as well. So you can see those and review those in detail as well, because we'll go through a lot more numbers than usual, and it's some really good stuff. And for this, we are using Joe Massey's rental spreadsheet. Now, as we often tell clients, his spreadsheet's designed for properties that are 4 units and less. It actually works perfectly fine for bigger properties, other than, sometimes you get an error saying, hey, that loan amount's too big, or we can't do that. That's just a spreadsheet automatic programming for doing residential loans, but it definitely works for doing these bigger properties. And we often use a more advanced spreadsheet from CCIM to do a more detailed analysis, but that thing is a beast, and we'd probably put you to sleep while you're driving if we try to explain that to you over a podcast. So we'll keep it simple, but most importantly, we'll be able to talk about the important numbers on here. So the down payment percentage, they put down 25%. Purchase price of $1,262,500. They're about $17,000 in acquisition cost. And then we had a $5,000 seller credit for the sewer. So all in, the buyers were in there for about $327,000. Now their interest rate on this property was at 3.625%, so a nice low interest rate over that 3-year ARM. Now the current rents, if you're looking at this with us, Unit 1 has all 8 units in there. Or all 8 rental units in there combined, and they're currently bringing about $7,735. Now there are 2 vacant units, but we went in there and just assumed, average rent in there so we could see what they were like. And then all the units were being charged $50 a month in RUBS, so an extra $400 a month. So the gross income on here was $8,135. So we put in a vacancy factor of 5%. That's kind of the go-to number here in Denver to use for multi-buildings. So 5% is the common number you'll see. Now going over the operating data, they are using property management. So we put in 8% on here. Now our preferred property manager charges 7%. So we add up another 1% to help cover some of the cost on there for turnover and some other fees. Now on the spreadsheet here for Joe, we put 0 in his repairs and maintenance, not because we don't have repairs and maintenance, but because we put them below in the additional annual expenses. So for those, we separate out the estimated repairs per unit per year, and this is just the stuff that breaks throughout the year, like the non-CapEx expenses. So we put that in $800 per door, or $6,400 a year. And then for reserves, we put in $150 per unit per year for about $1,200 a year. And so that is for the longer term capital expenditure items, roof, windows, that type of thing. So going through the other stuff, taxes are about $6,100 a year. Property insurance is about $4,100 a year. Water and sewer is $1,800. Trash was $1,750. Electric's about $3,500. And then there's, only 1 meter for electric and gas, so the landlord's paying for everything. And then we're budgeting about $1,000 a year for, basic landscaping and then doing some snow removal. So you can see here, we got all the numbers plugged in here. Now let's talk about what they are as far as returns wise. So the annual cash flow is $7,261 a year. So that's once you take the rents, minus the expenses, minus mortgage payment, you're left about $7,200 a year. Now, in terms of a cash-on-cash return, it's a 2.2% cash-on-cash return and a 4.7 cap rate. So, Preston, if you knew nothing else about this property other than said, hey, we bought a 4.7 cap rate near DU, what would your response be?
I don't think I'd be super excited about it, Chris. I mean, I know we see some stuff in the better areas of town or nicer up-and-coming areas that have some lower cap rates, but, usually anything sub 5 is not something we love to get excited about. So that's what made this property really interesting to us was the stuff we're going to go through next as far as kind of the potential upside and the performer numbers. But looking at a 4.7 cap with 2.2% cash on cash is not something many of our clients would get real excited about.
And this is one of the reasons why you can't just, do a quick cap rate calculation or just look at the offering memorandum from sellers or other agents and say, oh, no, this is junk. You have to dig in the numbers because a lot of times they are junk, but other times like, oh, wow, there's something here. And if you get the numbers right and come up with a strategy, it can be a really good play. So the plan here for this property, and like I said, just to give everyone the big picture again, they bought this property on a 3-year loan with a plan on doing all these updates. Once these updates are done, the property is stabilized, they get enough operating data to go out there and get a non-recourse loan, and that is a loan that's a non-personal guarantee. They can hopefully get a longer term, 5-year, 7-year, 10-year rate, but also maybe pull out some cash as well to help them go out there and buy some more properties. So the plan here is to update the two units to bring them to market rent. So they'll probably be about $7,500 a month per unit, and it's mostly, or $7,500 per unit to rehab it, and that's mostly just your typical cosmetic stuff. Like I said, some of the leases were below current market rent. So as leases expire, you need to bring them up to market rent, and depending on the time of year you bring them up, they should be bringing about $1,050 to $1,100 a month. $1,100 a month. The current utility bill back system is low. As you said earlier, the previous owner was charging $50 per unit per month, but they think they can charge about $100 per unit per month. And then there are 8 parking spaces, And so none of these were being rented out. And so we had estimated about $25 a month. And then once our property manager came in here, she said about $50 per month. And then there are also 7 storage units. And again, none of them are being charged rent for people to use them. So we estimate about $25 a month, and our property manager estimated about $35 a month. So you'll notice there are definitely some ranges on there. And this is just how pro formas go. Like, we never know exactly how much rent or how much this is going to cost, or how much things will bring in. So we like to kind of try to do a conservative and a optimistic range on here, so we can kind of get an idea. Hey, hopefully it should be somewhere in between here. So we'll talk about both these numbers here. But for this next spreadsheet, we plugged in the lower end of these. So that way we could go through and discuss the conservative pro forma, and then we'll talk numbers on the more optimistic pro forma and discuss how that plays out. So again, we kept the exact same data in here for acquisition cost, buying a property, interest rate, all that stuff. Except now we put in the conservative pro forma numbers here for the rental units. So assuming units are getting towards that better market rent, it should be around $7,960, about $600 in utility bill back, and then $200 in parking, and $175 in storage. So altogether, that'll be a total rental income of about $8,935. Kept the same vacancy factor of 5% in there. Kept all the same operating data, because that really shouldn't change as we go out there and look at this. So all the same operating data earlier. But now it about doubles the cash flow to about $15,600 a year. Gives us a 4.8% cash on cash return, and gives us a 5.3 cap rate. Now, 5.3 cap rate's a little better looking, isn't it, Preston?
That's much better looking and what we would typically expect to see in an area like this with a property very similar to this. So, I think just getting the property stabilized and managed correctly is going to be a huge, huge upside for our clients. And knowing, that it's pretty easy to get all that done, and they can probably take care of that, as the leases all turn over here in the next 6 to 8 months. And, that's going to be something really good for those guys.
And so, as I said, that's the conservative pro forma. Again, we can't guarantee it, but based off everything we looked at, based off our property manager, walking the property and looking at it, we feel like this is the lower end of what we can hope to expect, 6 months to a year from now. Now, if we go to the more optimistic pro forma, so, the higher side of the rent, the higher side of charging for parking spaces and storage units, it actually comes out to a 6.3 cap rate with about $27,000 a year in cash flow. So the high side we're saying a 6.3 cap rate, the low side we're saying a 5.3 cap rate. Preston, what does your crystal ball say? Where will it fall?
My crystal ball says this will be probably right around a 6 cap by the time everything shakes out and they get it all done. I think, 5.8 to 6 cap is very realistic for these guys, especially knowing, again, the location. Location is key for this property.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I'm thinking too. Probably a high 5, 6 cap rate being realistic. Again, we always like to try to give, realistic numbers, so that way people have realistic expectations. And so, do we honestly know what it is? No, we won't. And, a year from now, we will know what it is. So hopefully it should be somewhere between a 5.3 and a 6.3 cap rate, hopefully more towards that 6 cap rate end. So even let's say kind of the worst case scenario here, if this ends up being a 5.3 cap rate, property that they buy instead, on the lower side, just because it's based on location, it's still a great long-term asset to own. Yeah, it'll be less cash flow per year, but it's still a cash flow positive property that's requiring low maintenance in a great part of town. Now, kind of second piece to here, I know a lot of our listeners out there know what the BRRRR strategy is: the buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat. I can never say that thing too fast to make sure I get it all right, but it's a strategy that a lot of people talk about with single family homes. They buy a property, very quickly they do it, and within 6 months they're pulling money out. Now, if you're doing apartment buildings, it's definitely a lot of times it's much more common to see a delayed BRRRR is what we call it. And delayed BRRRR, hey, it might take 18 months. It might take that long from beginning, from closing this to closing a refinance. Because even if they got all this work done, let's say in 1 year, hey, a year from they bought it, they got all this work done, new tenants in place, everything's dialed in. Well, to go out there to a lender and say, hey, we want to refinance this, we want to pull out some cash, they say, hey, we're going to want to see some historical operating data. And usually like to see, 3 months minimum of stabilized, a lot of times longer. So it might take realistically about 18 months, maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit longer, to actually get to the other end of the closing where they can refinance and potentially pull money out of here. So like I said, the components of this longer piece here is to still have a cash flowing property, to then put this onto a non-recourse loan. So that's something where they are not personally guaranteeing it. So if Preston goes out there and buys a house act to live in or whatever, goes by as a rental property, I should say, a single family home, they're underwriting the property, but Preston, he also has to personally guarantee it. If he stops paying the rents on there, they're going to come after him. Now, in a non-recourse loan, the owner is not personally guaranteeing the property, meaning that if the payments are not being made, well, they can only go after the asset. They can't go after the person behind it. So in order to underwrite a non-recourse loan on a property, there's a lot tighter underwriting guidelines because they can only get the property, not the person who owns it. So they want to see a lot more operating data and some much, much more thorough underwriting. So they want to do a non-recourse loan on there, and that way they're not personally guaranteeing it, and then it'll be over a 30-year amortization, and they're hoping to do, a 7 or 10-year fixed interest rate. So right now that's, in the high 3s to low 4s. In a year from now, we'll see what it is in a year from now, but right now it's some great rates. But here's the really cool thing. Since this is an income property that's more than 5 units and above, if they increase the net operating income, they increase the NOI, that's how they usually evaluate the properties. Now, they still have to look at, what other properties are selling for relative to their own NOI, but a lot of times they come up with a cap rate for that area. So, a low 5 cap rate is about the going cap rate in that area. So assuming that type of cap rate in the future, if they can increase the cash flow to a 27,000 year cash flow or a 6.3 cap rate based off their purchase price, they'll be able to pull anywhere out from about $100,000 to $225,000. So $100,000 if it's on the lower side of our pro forma, about $225,000 on the higher side of our pro forma. So Preston, now if you look at that, 4.8 cap rate that we bought it for, now we're talking about in a year and a half having a 6-ish cap rate in a great part of town, strong cash flow, and then maybe pulling out $150,000. Different story there, huh?
That kind of looks like a home run if you'd ask me, Chris. I think, the potential upside here, obviously, we have a crystal ball that we would like to look into, but we don't know for sure what the future is going to hold. But I think there's a really good chance that this property is going to end up performing much better than everyone originally thought. And the other nice thing about this area is there's a lot of development happening over there. So there's a pretty good chance that, rents are going to keep creeping up, maybe even higher than kind of what our standard Denver market is looking like just because of the location. So, there's so many good things happening over there. I'm really excited to see how this plays out in, 12 or 18 months.
Yeah, and even like worst case scenario, they can't pull out money. This is still a great worst case scenario. They own a great asset. Oh, they can't pull out cash. But better case scenario, they pull out $250,000. I mean, that's a hefty down payment to go out there and buy a fourplex, or good chunk of money to go out there and buy another 8 or 10 unit property out there. And this is where we often talk to, potential clients, or I talk to a lot of people coming through the website and the podcast, like, oh, I want to do this strategy. I'm like, great. Shift your focus back a little bit. Like if you have a little bit more patience and longer term perspective, I'd call this a medium term play. This is a year, say 18 months. And that's really not that long in the grand scheme of things. You're not turn the property around in 18 weeks, but in 18 months, you can go out there and have a great asset, pull out some cash, go out there and repeat it. And just think, if they can save up some more money, then every 2 or 3 years buy another property like this and repeat it. You do that 3 or 4 times, I mean, your great grandkids' college is paid for, no matter how much that inflates to in 80 years. Like, it's a great play here. So I just want to really emphasize that, because as you're looking at real estate deals, always look at that longer term play, have the patience, because there's a lot more opportunity out there. It's a lot safer. And if you just play that long game, there's tons of opportunities out there. And it's a great plan to go out there and help build your retirement income. Preston, you got any final thoughts in here before we wrap this up?
No, I think that pretty much covers it, Chris. This was a really fun property to work on and get our clients under contract and to the closing table. And like I said, I'm really looking forward to seeing how this works out over the next 12, 18, 24 months.
Yeah. All right, everyone. Well, thank you for listening. And Preston, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks, Chris.